Hello and welcome back to Look Both Ways with David and Wes, pragmatic conversations about all things transportation. My name is David Zipper. I am a senior fellow at the MIT Mobility Initiative and a frequent writer on all kinds of topics related to transportation and tech. And Wes, you are?
I am still Wes Marshall, professor of civil engineering at University of Colorado, Denver, and I guess the author of Killed by a Traffic Engineer.
Yeah, I guess you are. Seems likely.
Yeah.
It's sitting right behind you, as always. I've mixed things up a little bit for those who are watching. I usually sit in a different way in my room, but I have a new mic, so I'm trying things out. And if I move around the right way, you might be able to see Waffle House, the cat, who is just south of the viewing range here, and he's perking up. So I just suspect he may jump up on the couch at some
Is
point.
that cardboard box I see part of the cat toy?
No, yeah, well, I mean, no, it's me who's gnawing on the edge that you can see there, Wes.
All
Yes, it
right.
is yeah, we have all these fancy cat toys, which are unused, and then we get a freaking Amazon box, and Waffle House is just like going to town. That's just how it is.
Same with kids, man. Like, you have all these fancy toys, and you give them like your keys when they're little. That's all they want to play with. Like,
It's fair. All right, well, let's, we always like to begin our episodes with a little bit of a transportationist related question, and I thought that we do a lot of car bashing in previous episodes, but you said you like cars, and I certainly can enjoy a nice car ride. So my question is, do you have a most memorable car drive that you've taken?
yeah. So I guess it was what 2 summers ago when so my son, he's 18 now, but when he was 16, we usually spend a couple weeks on Cape Cod every summer.
Hmm.
He asked if we could drive instead of fly. So my wife and daughters flew. My son and I made the cross country drive, and as part of that, we started looking for the world's biggest ball of twine type stuff that we could see. So
Mm-hmm.
we saw like Mount Rushmore and Niagara Falls and like the Corn Palace in the middle of wherever, and like the mini leaning tower of Pisa that's in suburban Chicago, and the Bean.
Did
So
you
it was
find like the biggest Cheeto ever discovered, which
oh
is
yeah,
somewhere, I
we
think, in
found
Indiana or whatever?
not that one, but we kind of looked up all weird stuff, I think, because my son would be more into that kind of stuff than actually seeing national parks or stuff. Like,
Mhm.
there are people like, oh, you should see this national park. It's like, yeah, that's not his jam. But we saw a lot of weird stuff. And actually, on the way back, my personal favorite thing, we were stuck in traffic in close to Indianapolis. And I saw a sign that said, like, next exit is the Hoosiers Gym. So I was like, well, we're
Oh,
getting off.
wow.
So we
Wow.
went to this thing, and it
That wow,
was
I never would have guessed we're back to talking about an 80s movie with you, Wes.
yeah,
It
it
never
was
happens here.
it was amazing. Like we pulled in. It was like 15 minutes before they closed, and two older couple came out the door to like greet us. And I was like, "Are you guys closing?" She said, "Like, no, 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 come in anyways." So we got to spend like an hour and a half there, like shooting baskets, like where they filmed Hoosiers, and um,
Did you
like
take, like, an underhanded foul shot just to commemorate it?
I did not do that, but I did hit my first shot, which was a 3-pointer, which I still am proud of that. And I could go down to the locker room. I don't know. It was just an amazing thing. I would never have seen that otherwise. And yeah, so that trip was definitely pretty memorable. How about you?
It's actually funny. I was thinking before, like, what would I answer to this? I also thought cross country. When I drove right soon after college, my partner and I at the time drove almost cross country. The car broke down on Vail Pass in Colorado, which
Mm,
scared the blank out of me. Let's put it that way, because
yeah.
the brakes went out. But actually, when we got the car fixed, we kept on going, and the part of that drive in southern Utah. I don't know if you've driven much out there. It's not that far from you. You never been out there near like
I've
Moab and
uh,
Canyonlands and stuff?
I've never driven further west than like Telluride. So Colorado's, but I've
Oh,
not
is that
gone.
right?
Yeah, no. So my cross country trip was Denver to Cape Cod, not
I see.
California.
I
You know.
see. Yeah, I mean, well, if you have a chance, like I don't even, for those who've not experienced it, driving in southern Utah is just wild, because there's lots of national parks and national monuments, but it kind of doesn't matter if you're in one or not, because every single moment you have unbelievable views from the highway, and there's almost nobody living there. There's no way of getting around without a car, by the way, unless you're a much better bike rider than I am, I think. And I was just kind of in awe. It was, several hours of the most spectacular driving I've ever done. And I still think about it, 25 years later. So that would get my vote. Southern Utah, man. You got to check it out. You're way closer than I am now.
That's true. And I have actually a second place that just came to mind too. Like back in college, it was I think the day before Groundhog's Day, and I kind of threw it out there to my friends, like, hey, let's drive to Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. We jumped in the car and we did that from Charlottesville, Virginia to Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. Had a lot of fun there and saw the groundhog thing the next morning, and shenanigans ensued. So that was a fun trip too.
Well, you weren't there the year that Bill de Blasio dropped and killed Punxsutawney Phil?
No, this would have been like 1990 something.
Well before that.
I
you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. Like in the middle of Pennsylvania, we saw a sign for like next exit for the world's largest vehicular incline lift. And I was like, well, we're doing this. So we got off. We did that in the middle of somewhere, Pennsylvania. The guy operating that, it was kind of an escalator for cars. He was wasted, and he brought us up there, and basically just bring you to the top of this mountain, and you drive down the hill. Like that was
that sounds totally safe. Good road safety, very important.
Yeah.
Well, good. All right. Well, see, we criticize cars so much on this podcast. I thought it'd be good to talk about some positive memories or experiences we had behind the wheel. So good. We've both done that. And now we can go back to basically bashing cars for much of the episode, I expect, because we're now going into word on the street. You're going to take the lead here, but I think we're going to be talking about cars right off the bat. So lead on.
Yeah. So I know this is happening a little bit in DC as well, but I know the Boston story a little bit more. So I'll focus more on that. So I know there's a group of Boston city councilors that have introduced a proposed ordinance that's basically aimed at restricting or regulating the deployment of AVs. So it's kind of in response to Waymo coming out there to sort of test their devices like they're happening in Denver as well. So part of the provisions I've read about, they're going to require a human safety operator, which is not the right term I think I'd use for that. But the idea is there's supposed to be a real person in these cars whenever it's transporting passengers or goods, which they're going to launch this big study that's supposed to look at the potential effects of AVs on the economy, on employment, traffic, safety, so on and so forth, and come up with a new advisory board. So I think that study is supposed to be done by mid next year or something. And with this story, like some of the interesting things that came to mind is like who are the big proponents of the ordinance. So when you read about it, it's like the Uber and Lyft drivers are some of the biggest people saying that we need to restrict these. And the Teamsters, like some of the folks that even do long haul trucking, are trying to kind of put a kibosh on Waymo. So I won't give my thoughts yet, but I guess we can just start with that. Like, what do you think about this? Like, is this the sort of approach cities should be taking, like to try to restrict them, or should we give them a chance? I don't know. How do you see this in your mind?
Well, I mean, the safety driver requirement is an interesting one because as a resident of Boston, I see zero downside to requiring that there be safety drivers in the front seat, the driver's seat of any autonomous vehicle. All that can do is make the experience of sharing a street with an autonomous vehicle safer. It's all upside if you're a Bostonian. The problem is that if you are, in my view, if you're Waymo, that's a disaster because the only way you can actually learn and see and make your technology be better is if it's actually operating without the safety driver. And of course, it also increases expenses, but this is ultimately how you learn and get better is you basically go out there on public roads without the sort of safety net beneath you. So it's pretty much, I think, a clear tension between public interests and private interests. And, like I here in DC where I live, a council member introduced a bill that would have allowed Waymo and other AVs to be deployed without a safety driver. And I remember when that happened, I posted on Blue Sky, I just said, I would love to hear just an explanation of why I, as a DC resident, am better off without a safety driver. Because I just don't think there's any answer whatsoever. Well, that's my first thought.
It sort of ruins the whole point of it. Like having a safety driver there, it's not really an AV anymore. I mean, also, I know full well, like that first pedestrian death, Elaine Herzberg, the one that happened with the Uber autonomous car. Like
in Arizona, yeah.
Like there was a so-called safety driver in that, and she was watching The Voice on her phone as the car ran over Elaine Herzberg. And you know, from the research on this sort of stuff, like we know full well that humans are not built to sit there sort of waiting for something to happen when something rarely, if ever,
Mhm.
happens. Um, so I'm not even sure that safety driver would help. It would just kind of help it not create kind of those weird situations. Like you see that clip from LA the other day where the Waymo like drove through a situation with like 10 cops pulling their guns on a guy on the ground. Like it
Yeah, and just kept on going. Yeah.
they just kept on
Yeah.
going like nothing's happening. So it would kind of protect against that. But in terms of actual safety, it's hard to imagine there being a real difference on that front, at least.
I don't know if I agree with you on that. I think of the other really like horrific AV instance is with Cruise in San Francisco a couple of years ago. You probably know about
Yeah.
when there was a pedestrian who landed beneath, was hit by a car and ended up beneath a Cruise vehicle. And if that, it's sort of like an edge case freak thing. If it happened with you or
And
me
it,
or anybody behind the wheel, we
oh
would have
yeah,
just halted. But the Cruise vehicle drove 20 feet, dragging this poor person beneath the wheels to the curb and really inflicted horrific injuries. That's an example where a safety driver could have actually done a lot of good. So I think that you could create safety standards or various rules for basically showing a performance level at which point you could potentially remove the safety driver, but just sort of blanketly permitting driving without one. I'm curious to hear the argument for why this is in the public interest beyond it just being in Waymo's interest.
so do you distinguish between Waymo and the other companies? Because I feel like Waymo is probably the only company I sort of trust to some
Well,
extent
that's a good
on.
point too. Yeah, well, Waymo's done a very good job with its PR, and it's created much more trust than other companies. And I think there's some justification there. I think they probably are taking safety more seriously from all that I've seen, certainly than Tesla,
Yeah.
pretty
Oh,
obviously.
yeah. That's not
And
even the
and
same
you know,
ballpark.
Zoox is not really as visible, but they seem like they're doing a pretty good job as far as I can tell, too, relatively speaking. But Waymo is the one that's basically expanding absolutely everywhere. Like it's a game of Risk, like plopping down a few cars in Baltimore and then Seattle and Detroit, blah 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 blah. So that's where I'm really focused in my thought.
Yeah.
But let me actually get back to your original sort of intro, if I could, because
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we're talking about safety drivers here, but there's a broader point you're making, which is that the argument against robo taxis in Boston is all based on labor. It sounds like, right?
It sounds like, and it sounds like the exact argument that taxi drivers were making a dozen years ago when Uber and Lyft came to the forefront. It's like, oh no, we can't let this happen, blah blah blah.
Yeah, sort of like turnaround is not fun for anybody in that way. Look, like,
Do you remember
yeah,
that South Park episode where Timmy has the handicab that he drives around? Do you ever watch South Park?
I not for a while, but I don't
Uh,
think I saw that episode.
no, like so Timmy, he's the handicap boy, and he's got a wheelchair, and he starts giving people rides on it, and the taxi drivers, the Uber and Lyft, are all up in arms. They're like, "Hey, like he's taking away our jobs. Like we can't let this happen. We need to go talk to the mayor." Blah blah blah. And there's one other character is like, "Hey, I have an idea. Like, why don't you guys just make your cars cleaner and nicer and try to, better compete with handy cars' popularity in the marketplace by doing better for your customers?" And everyone's like, "No, no, no. Let's not do that. Let's just ban them." It's kind of a funny.
Yeah, I mean, like, so I actually have some personal experience with this because I was
Oh,
in the Washington D.C. mayor's office working there when Uber first came to D.C. And D.C. is one of the first cities that Uber expanded to. So I had a front row seat to what was really a titanic battle with regulations, and it actually led to a book that was published called "Disrupting D.C." I don't know if you read that one, Wes, by
no.
Princeton University Press. I wrote an essay sort of critiquing it where they basically say, "Oh, it was all terrible. Ride hail was uniformly awful for DC. It destroyed wealth and blah 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 blah." I'm exaggerating in some ways. There were a couple interesting arguments within the book that I'm not going to get into now, but the review I wrote, which was in Bloomberg City Lab a few years ago, was pretty critical, basically saying yeah, ride hail creates a lot of problems, and I've written about a lot of them. But let's be honest, the taxis in DC and a lot of other cities were awful. The
Yeah.
cars were terrible. The drivers were rude. They ripped you off. They were racist. They wouldn't pick up black people who were trying to get a ride. They wouldn't go to black neighborhoods. Like Uber and Lyft forced a really positive set of change by undermining a decrepit, sclerotic industry. So, like in a lot of ways, we don't talk about this very much. We should be grateful to ride hail for forcing taxi companies to get with it in the 2010s, I would argue. Maybe it's
Like
the case in Denver too.
to use apps and that sort of stuff instead of having to dial 777.
Totally. It was a better option. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they forced taxis to get better. Now there's other societal problems around ride hail, undermining transit and creating congestion. We all know about that, and it's really a
Yeah,
problem.
and
But
the vehicle miles traveled that comes from it. And you're going to have the same sort of problems with Waymo, but at the same time, it's probably going to force the hand of Uber and Lyft and taxis to either become cheaper or something, right?
I don't know. I feel like it was kind of a one-off situation where we really had this incumbent, almost captured industry, or the industry of taxis had like captured local government, at least in DC, and that's now gone thanks to ride hail. So I don't see ride hail as being quite as bad as taxis circa 2008. But to me, this is the point I was trying to get to. Like my overarching feeling about the sort of the pushback against the pushback against robo-taxis just based on labor is like, I don't know. To me, I'm not convinced that it's a terrible thing to disrupt driving jobs necessarily. Like inequality is a huge problem, but I do believe in creative disruption, yada yada. The real reason to fight robo-taxis, in my view, is it revolves around the ways in which they increase vehicle miles traveled and they lock cities in to a car-dominated future. And that was really the debate that San Francisco was having a couple of years ago with the coning, if you remember that, where protesters were putting cones on top of Waymos and freezing them in place. I wrote about that in the Atlantic. To me, that's the really big stakes here of what a ton of robotaxis would do to a city in terms of allowing it to be multimodal in the future. And I'd love to see more debate around that. It's just that I think that there's less of a sort of like an interest group pressure around that, I suppose, compared to organized labor or even unorganized labor in the case of ride hail.
Well, it sounds like you're saying that there could be some guardrails. Like I know with our current scooter deployment, the shared scooters, like there's a limit on the number that they could have, and so what certain percentage of them have to be bikes versus scooters. Like you could do the same thing with Waymo and limit the number that comes.
No, you couldn't. Only in very few cities, Wes.
Why?
Well, because it's regulated at the state level, not the city level. Try to do that in Austin, Texas. No way, no how. TxDOT will never let Austin do that, and Austin knows it.
I mean, so Boston can, do the human safety operator, all that kind of stuff, but
Boston can do that because Boston is or Massachusetts is one of a handful of states, and I'm sorry not to wonk out on this, but like I've gotten deep into it. Like
right.
You can count the states on your fingers where cities actually can regulate ride hail themselves. Illinois, Washington State, New York, DC, if you count it as a state. I think Oregon is one as well, but think about California. San Francisco has had all kinds of issues with ride hail because it's regulated by CPUC, not by the cities themselves. And that's the case for Waymo as well. The cities are trying to find ways of regulating ride hail in places like California because the states preempted them.
So the funny thing to me is too, like the proponents of it are all like that op-ed that you went hard against the other day in the New York Times. Like that guy was all about the safety aspects of it, and the detractors are kind of talking about the jobs and that sort of thing. And I don't think either two are like sort of the main arguments that could or should be made on this.
No,
like, to have a real discussion, like those two are not where I'd start.
Neither do I. No, I totally agree with you. It's frustrating to me that we're not talking about the implications of having a city with not a few hundred robotaxis, which is kind of fun and cute, but like a few 100,000, which really could create crippling congestion, as I think we've talked about on this podcast before, and be really disruptive to traffic flow and make it much, much harder to be able to create new bike lanes and new bus rapid transit when lots of people inside of robotaxis are demanding as much space as possible for their vehicles because they're stuck in congestion. And And yeah, and just as a quick aside for those who wondering what Wes was referring to, I got into a bit of a back and forth. There was the New York Times op-ed a few days ago by a neurosurgeon and venture capitalist who basically was saying it's a public health emergency that we throw open the barn door and welcome as many Waymos as possible. And he concluded this after spending, in his words, weeks poring over Waymo's self-reported and unvalidated safety data. And I had a back and forth with him on LinkedIn where I was like, did you consult any of the unaffiliated robotics and transportation experts who have deep expertise in autonomous vehicle data? Because they don't actually believe in your conclusion at all. And he didn't really have a good response to that.
I loved what he did there. He's like, oh, good questions. But then he didn't answer your questions.
No, he didn't. It was, I mean, God, I will say this, like, Waymo has incredible PR. Wow. They really have convinced everyone that their self-reported data is totally trustworthy and that they are the future of road safety. And never mind automatic speed cameras, never mind speed governors, never mind bike lanes. We just need to hold on and wait however long it takes for robotaxis to be everywhere.
All right. I think this might be time for some roundabout, huh?
Sorry, you got me going. It's your fault. You're the one who want to talk about this.
All right.
All right, let's switch gears. Let's talk about something that I think we both care about, and it's not funny in the way that some of this stuff can be funny because I don't know how else to make it with robotaxis. I want to talk about the e-bike industry. Do you have an e-bike out of curiosity, Wes?
I do, yeah. I got one a couple months ago. I had one before. Actually, when I first got one after coming back from Australia, 2017, because there I lived on the other side of like a gigantic hill. I literally could not ride up it. And then in 2017, it was rare to see an e-bike in the U.S., but over there, people were just passing me like nothing on their e-bikes up this hill. So my thinking at the time was, when I come back, I'll get one. So I first got one back then. I just got a new one a couple of months ago.
What kind did you get?
Priority. It's like a New York-based company.
Don't know it. Yeah, interesting. I mean, so the e-bike industry, as I think you know, and my guess is some listeners are aware, is hitting some tough moments. There was boom years during the pandemic and right afterwards when e-bike sales were really escalating. The whole bike industry was really riding a wave during the pandemic, but those days are gone. And the e-bike industry is facing some real issues because of tariffs from the Trump administration, because a lot of bikes as well as bike components are made in China or in other countries that are subject to tariffs, which creates a real problem. Then you've got these sort of, I think, sort of muddied sort of stories about e-bike fires that aren't really involving e-bikes. They're involving these sorts of like very fast electric two-wheelers, but they get sort of conflated together. And I think sort of like part and parcel for or emblematic, I should say, of the challenges of e-bikes is Rad Power, which has really been an industry leader out of Seattle, I believe. And they are on the brink of bankruptcy, according to numerous stories. They're running out of cash. The Consumer Protection Agency, CPSC, has issued a warning about older batteries that could catch fire as a result of 31 fires reported. And from what I understand, the critique of them is that they scaled very fast during the pandemic. They got caught with too much inventory, and they were selling them at a loss. And they basically were in a rough position even before the CPSC stuff happened and before this sort of downturn in the overall market occurred. And you may remember, like a year ago, Van Moof also went kaput. That was the Dutch company that got a lot of VC money. And I guess it's worth noting that all the news isn't terrible. The Netherlands and Germany now actually sell more e-bikes than pedal bikes overall, which is really pretty remarkable. But when you look overall at the industry, in the US at least, these are not great moments. The vibes are not good for e-bike companies or for the e-bike industry writ large, I would say. So I've got some thoughts about this, but before I go into that, I'd be curious to hear what you think, Wes.
Well, it's interesting because the e-bike market seems to be growing still, but it's just that there's a lot of other players in there now. Like Rad had kind of filled a niche in the market in terms of like good quality but lower cost e-bikes. But now there are other companies that provide that same sort of thing. So it's been hard, and like I think they sort of fall into the same traps of a lot of those startups do. Is like, they had 500% growth for a couple of years there, and they expected that to just continue, which doesn't make any logical sense. So,
Yeah.
um,
I mean, hardware is hard, right? That's the sort of
yeah.
adage.
Well,
And
making money in transportation is really
well, that's
hard. Like,
also true.
like it's
Well,
not. Yeah,
yeah,
go
I
ahead.
mean, I think no, I think it's notable that Van Moof and Rad Power both got a lot of VC money, which is predicated on growth. So they're going to spend a lot of their money quickly because that's why investors give you the money to spend it so you can grow and dominate your market. And my hope and frankly my expectation is that some of the smaller players that have been maybe a bit more, dare I say it, responsible in their growth plans may end up having a better outcome. But I also think, it's as I think it's sad to see what's happening with Rad Power. No, I don't want to see them go away. I'm sure you don't either. But it's also worth taking a step back. And I think you're right. Like e-bikes writ large, as best I can tell, they are still growing. The sales are growing in the US. People are still riding for sure. And in some ways, bankruptcies can be a sign of maturity in an industry. I was looking just before the recording, like 100 years ago. Do you want to guess, Wes, in the 1910s, how many car companies there were in the early days of the auto industry, like circa 1915? Guess.
I read some books on the history of the car industry recently. And it
All
was
right. Well,
like
then you should
it was
get
like
this right. No excuse.
it was like over 1,000. It was a lot, or whatever the number is. I don't know exactly, but there
Yeah.
was a lot. More than you would think is the answer.
Yeah, it's a couple thousand is the best
Okay.
estimate that historians have. And obviously, most of those, the vast majority, went out of business. There was only one Ford, right?
Right.
And I think that there's no reason to expect the e-bike industry to be that different. There's going to be consolidation inevitably, and but I think if Rad Power does go bust in the next few weeks, as a lot of people are predicting, I think I would suggest caution in any sort of overreacting hot takes, being like, "Oh my God, the year of the e-bike is over." It's not. I don't think it is.
Oh yeah, no, I agree on that front wholeheartedly. At one point I think their company was valued at like $1.5 billion, and like that seems high. I don't know.
Well, now it does.
Well, I don't know. I also think back to like Uber and Lyft. Like these are companies that, they really weren't turning a profit for, I mean, ever, and it still made their founders like hundreds and millions of dollars. Like I don't know, it just seems weird, and maybe this is old school thinking by me, is that you can start a company that just doesn't make money, and you make hundreds of millions of dollars, then you get out before the company ever makes money, and you still have all. I don't know. It's just it seems like Rad wasn't quite to that extent, but they grew too much too quickly with that sort of same mentality. And it's different when it's a hardware thing. I mean, because the advantage of Uber and Lyft, they don't actually have to own anything other than an app.
Exactly. VC
Um,
money into hardware is tough.
it's tough. It's a
I've done VC
different,
work myself. It's really hard.
yeah.
Um, it's really hard. I will say one other interesting anecdote from this year that I think is encouraging of the future of e-bikes. You may have seen that Rivian spun out its own micromobility branch called Also. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was announced in March. New first vehicle is a $4,500 sort of luxury e-bike, which is, I believe, going on sale in the next month or two. And obviously that's out of the price point of a lot of people, but it is interesting that a car company is seeing potential in micromobility in that way. I think that makes a lot of sense, partly because cars are just getting so freaking expensive. The average car is now over $50,000, a new car in the US. And that creates, in the long term, I think, an opportunity for people to say, you know what, maybe I should look at micromobility, whether it's an e-bike or an e-cargo bike or even a golf cart in lieu of my second or third automobile. So I am medium term bullish on e-bikes, and I remain so for sure. But I think the next little while is going to be quite rocky.
And I also wonder why. I mean, as far as I know, Rad never had scooters. Like they never had e-scooters, did they? Like, I mean, why didn't they
Not to my
try to
knowledge.
diversify a little bit more? Like there's so much else happening, and they kind of. I mean, maybe they stuck to their guns where they thought they were strongest, but I was surprised they never got around to doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, not to my knowledge. But let's put a bookmark in this one. I
All
almost said a
right.
kickstand, which made no sense, but I wanted to make it relevant. And go over to you.
All right, so my roundabout is returning to our topic from last time, which is access or access versus mobility or accessibility. And my point back then was that it felt to me as like we could use a new term. Like accessibility works, but it kind of works for the wonks and the researchers. Like they all sort of know what it means, but in the grander scheme of things, I feel like one of the reasons we haven't been able to make much traction in like the sort of thinking that we should be designing transportation based on accessibility as opposed to mobility never has taken hold because of some of those limitations. With that, I asked our listeners to give me their thoughts as to what that new word could be. And this is one we got a lot of emails about. So I will go through a couple of what I see here. I mean, we got one guy, Dave, he was from Australia. He actually likes using the term accessibility. And he pointed out to some of the research. I don't know if it was he or some of his people he knows did in Australia. But then he Googled access and accessibility, and he feels like we were right, that we do need to rethink this. Let's see. The second one I looked at was a guy named Joe who likes to listen to us while he goes for long runs in the dark. And he
It's a little macabre, isn't it?
I
Go on.
guess. He actually pointed out some stuff from the world of ecology, how they use gravity models, and asked if I was familiar with that. I was not. So I looked it up, and it basically sent me down a long rabbit hole of these gravity models they use in ecology, which are actually pretty similar to what we do in transportation planning. I won't pull you down that rabbit hole with me, but he never really gave me a term there. But when I started seeing the words that we could use instead, let's see, there was Matt. He liked the word agency, and he also liked the word freedom. Like, do I have the freedom to choose my mode of travel? Do I have the freedom to choose my location? Freedom to choose my destination?
Yeah, I like freedom too.
Kelsey liked reachability because it focuses on, I think, the concept that we think matters most, be able to reach the destinations. Colin likes the word convenience, which he says you mentioned in passing when we were brainstorming last time, and he globbed onto that. And he says it's the word he uses with his friends when describing what it's like when he goes over to Europe and is doing grocery shopping, just sort of how convenient it is. But the word I got a few times in here was either connected or connectedness. So Andrew said connectedness. He says, I know it's a bit awkward, but maybe awkward is good because you can highlight sort of the technical meaning of it. And then Alexandra also liked the word connect or connectedness. And he talks about how we often use that in like the long range plans that we have, like the Connect Denver 2050 plan or something. And actually Denver's is called the Denver Moves plan, but I know Cheyenne, Wyoming, like theirs is Connect Wyoming or Connect Cheyenne 2050. And that one was one that I thought made sense too, because I don't know. Let me hear your thoughts first before I get into what I think of the options here.
No, I think I don't know. I think a lot of them. I mean, I like agency. I think that can make sense. I think all of them could. I don't know. I think they could all potentially work. I guess my concern is like all of them also have. I guess to state the obvious, they all have other meanings.
Yeah, this is the same problem with the word access and accessibility.
Yeah, so I mean, they all have good thoughts behind them. The real problem to me is finding something that isn't sort of quote unquote claimed by those who have another implicit definition.
Yeah, so I will say after our last podcast, I actually took the train home that night, and on the train I was reading one of the signs for RTD, that's our change agency, and it said something. I wrote it down. It says, "We make lives better through connections. We take people to the places they need to go and want to go. We're connecting people to their professions and life experiences with flexible transit." Blah blah blah. That's where I saw, connections might be a good term. Like that's what we're trying to provide is connections. At the same time, you're right. It is something that has
a connection is literally a transfer. That's what people see it. I think. What's a connection? Oh, you mean like getting from here to there, or switching at this point to get off this bus and take another.
Yeah, so maybe Andrew was right that connectedness or something kind of weird
Maybe.
like that might work better because it doesn't have a kind of existing meaning. It's not a word we use, but it's connected to words that we use.
I don't know. I don't know. I think I don't have the answer for this, but I think that the more people who understand why speed alone is not the answer for what our entire transportation network should be pursuing, the better off we're going to be. So I hope people continue to debate it. Frankly, I just want to get more people recognizing that speed alone is not what we should be pursuing.
Yeah, and big picture, I mean, the point of transportation and how we measure success in transportation projects should be judging our ability to connect people to destinations. Like that is the crux of
Mhm.
it. So, and that's something that I hit on in my research. A lot of other people do as well,
Mhm.
but we just need a better wording. And to be honest, that is one thing that makes such a big difference in like you see this in politics all the time. Like just the way that people can revise the wording on something changes people's mentality of it all the time. And this is one that it feels like it's ripe for that.
Yeah, I need to find a good linguist. It's like what's that guy George Lakoff who wrote "Don't Think of an Elephant"? Remember that one?
I don't know
The
that one. No.
it's a perfect title, but it's basically about how wording and psychology, the psychology of wording changes how you think about politics. Like good example is the death tax, which is really the estate tax, but
Yeah.
Republicans made it sound like the death tax because then it's no longer about the rich, it's about, taxing people who when they
Who?
die. And we
Yeah.
all die, which feels unfair. So anyway,
Well,
it's
it's the same thing you hear. I mean, people aren't using the term road diet like they used to because they're like, oh, everybody hates diets. Like, why do we try to promote something that we know everybody hates? So they use like right sizing
Rhoda
streets or, yeah, road Ozempic or street reallocation or whatever it might be. Same with like bike boulevards. A lot of places will call it a neighborhood greenway instead of a bike boulevard because,
yeah.
yeah, a lot of people might not want a bike boulevard on the street they live on, but a neighborhood greenway, even though it could be the exact same thing, it just feels like more inclusive of everybody.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that Jarrett Walker, who really loves wording, talks about a lot. He says we shouldn't be talking about congestion pricing, we should be talking about decongestion pricing. And
Yeah.
he might be right, but I just think about like having a cold when I think of decongestion pricing. So maybe that's my own imaginative limits, but
You're
um
like, how
Jarrett's a
solve traffic
friend. No,
congestion?
no, no, no
Mucinex.
insult intended, but maybe that's my own problem. All right. Should we take a question from our listeners with mailbag?
Yes, let's do that.
All right. Matt asked a good question and he said that he would be curious to hear how we think about motorcycles. How do motorcycles fit into the broader conversation about sustainable transportation, street design, and mode shift? And he sort of acknowledges that they could be dangerous, but they also take up relatively less space. Pros and cons. They contain multitudes. What do you think?
Yeah, there's definitely pros and cons. Like, yes, they don't take up much space, but like they're so dangerous. And if you look at the data, like they're dangerous to the point where
It's absurd. It's crazy.
it's crazy. But whenever somebody dies on it, it's like, well, what do they expect? They were on a motorcycle. Like that's the kind of reaction you get from even professionals, like traffic engineers I know. Like that's the kind of thinking. It's like what can we do? Like this person's on a motorcycle, like something like that that's going 70 miles per hour. It's like it is what it is. So it's hard to combat against that sort of thinking. And to be honest, like when you start talking about those faster e-bikes, like they're not there yet, but they're moving in that direction
Yeah,
too.
they're
And
mopeds. They're close.
yeah, they're
Yeah.
kind of like mopeds, and you get almost that same reaction too. It's like, well, that kid was on a thing that's going 30 something miles per hour. Like, what do you expect? Like that definitely shouldn't be the case on those, but it happens all the time with motorcycles, and it's sad, but it's the data is shockingly bad on motorcycle safety. So it's a hard thing to kind of wrap. I have not done much research on motorcycles, so I can't speak to it more specifically on that front. But like just the raw data is like, oh my god, like it's tough to ever think that you should want to get on a motorcycle because of just the safety issues.
Yeah, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know Ian Savage, I think, is an economist Northwestern who looked at the comparative sort of crash death likelihoods per mile of travel, and motorcycles are. I think if I remember right, they're literally like 70 times more likely to die than somebody who's driving or in transit. Like it's wild. Like not 70%, 70 times.
Yeah. I don't know the numbers offhand, but it is orders and orders of magnitudes more. And also you get the inconsistencies like on the states that force kids to wear bike helmets, but they allow motorcyclists not to wear a helmet. Like there's stuff like that happens all the time.
No, and then there's also the noise factor because in
Yeah.
cities they create noise pollution and wake people up, which has real health effects beyond the annoyance factor. So I guess, Matt, overall, what I would say is like, given all of the very real downsides of motorcycles and the fact that that e-bikes and bikes exist, so do scooters that can create this sort of spatial benefits of giving people mobility outside of cars. I just don't know that I would ever recommend that cities adjust their transportation plans to encourage motorcycles. That feels like it's anathema to good governance, given the real health risks as well as the noise pollution factor. Like, I'm not saying ban them, but I just can't see how this is something we should be encouraging.
Have you ever been to like one of those motorcycle bike weeks before? Like,
yeah, I don't know.
Have you? Because I went to one of my best friends, his bachelor party was in Laconia, New Hampshire during Bike Week, and it is kooky. It's not my vibe, but it was interesting to see for sure.
Yeah. Matt, thank you for a good question. I have one more reader question we can ask before we should move on to rail drinks. This one is from Graham, who asks about managed lanes, which are, HOV lanes or tolled lanes. And he writes, I think accurately, that they seem to be the current answer against the quote unquote, just one more lane, bro, ridicule. So he says, like, if it's a managed lane, it somehow clears that criticism because it feels like they're not as wasteful as just expanding a highway with an additional lane. But he says, I think that these additional lanes that are managed with tolls aren't utilized as much as with general traffic lanes. They take up room. They take up room. They can be better used for a bus lane or perhaps not expanded at all. What do you guys think? Is what he asks. So what do you think about managed lanes, Wes?
So I know in Colorado, at least, like we've done a lot of additions of managed type lanes. And one of the reasons they've done that, there is some, I don't know if this is Colorado specific or this happens elsewhere as well, but there is some law that says they can't take an existing all-purpose lane and turn it into a managed lane because of the way the taxes were spent on that lane. So if they want to have a managed lane on a highway, they had to actually add a new lane as opposed to just transitioning one of the existing lanes to that. Have you heard that before?
I didn't know about that, but that makes sense.
So because of that, they've had to add lanes, and I think this is in my book, but I talk about the Shirley Highway in Virginia, where they had a bus only lane for a lot of years, and it was really successful. And at the same time, like buses are still going through there like once every 5 or 6 minutes. So all the people sitting in the full traffic lanes just get annoyed seeing this full empty lane. So eventually they shifted it to be more like a hot lane, high occupancy toll lane. And it took away the advantages the bus had, and the buses became non-competitive and kind of disappeared. So I think that, this listener has some good points that maybe they could or should be used differently, but could use them more like for BRT type things. At the same time, as is, they do a lot of good. Like even if you look at the research, even low-income people appreciate the ability to be able to pay for to get through traffic when they need to.
Well, I think the question becomes, well, why can't you take an existing lane and make it managed instead of adding the new managed lane, right?
Yeah.
That's the argument. I mean, I'm assuming there's not the sort of legal requirements that you're talking about. I actually don't know what I think about this one, to tell you the truth. I've heard people who I think very highly of say, Matt, I'd actually like to learn more about it so I can have more of my own opinion on it. But people say any kind of highway expansion is bad. I don't care if it's tolled or not. I've heard people say, look, if you just create the managed lane, you'll have to expand it again. You've inoculated the highway from any future expansion because you can just increase the expense of the managed lane. And I actually don't. I see both sides. I don't know what I believe, to tell you the honest truth. I don't know.
What about HOV lanes then? Not even the toll ones. Do you see any differences between tolled versus non-tolled? Like just having to promote more people in the vehicles?
I don't know. I haven't looked at the numbers. Do the HOV lanes actually end up moving more people?
Well, I know this actually came up in my class a couple weeks ago. We talked about slugging. Have you heard of slugging? Do you know
Yeah, we have that.
about
Well, we've had that historically in DC and
DC? Yeah, no, DC
95
is
a
one of
lot. Northern
the
Virginia. Yeah.
yeah. So it's kind of a off the books type system where people are trying to find riders to come with them in their car so they can ride in the HOV lane.
Yeah, but the pandemic kind of killed that. It's not happening anymore.
I heard it was back, as at least what the discussion came up in class.
Really?
Like it's probably not as popular as before. I don't know. There used to be a guy at TRB conference that was super into slugging and was selling it as like the future of transportation, but I've not seen him in many a year.
Mr. Slug.
He had a
Crazy.
slugging T-shirt. He had all this sort of stuff. That was
No. It's. I think actually Northern Virginia is like the national hub of it, but I don't hear anything about it, and I live in DC.
I hear about it in DC and San Francisco are the two main places
right?
I hear about it. But a lot of those places have transitioned to the HOT lane where they, you can just pay a toll instead of having those people.
Yeah. No, Graham, it's an interesting question, and I frankly may want to bring it up again at some point because it's something I'd like to look into more in the coming months, and I may have a better answer or a stronger opinion at that point than I do now. But for the moment, do you have a last thought?
No, it just relates to so much. Like we talked, was it last week at the time before, and we're a bigger discussion on transportation financing and coming up with money for this sort of stuff. So
that's another important point.
This is part of that, and it goes into congestion pricing. And somebody in our chat says traffic reduction pricing was one of the phrases that you have here for a word for that.
Yeah, I could see that. I'm sorry, but I just sort of cringe when I hear decongestion pricing, which a few urbanists do talk about. I just want to sneeze. Anyway, we should move on to rail drinks.
Okay.
Because we are always, as usual, recording this at around 7 p.m. Eastern, so it's time for a happy hour drink. What are you imbibing, Wes?
So this one is it's because of a friend of mine. He actually passed away a year ago tomorrow. He had brain cancer, and he had it for about 5 years, which was much, much longer than anyone thought you could have the glioblastoma for. So his family last summer went to Scotland, and they brought me back this Talisker from the Isle of Skye Scotch whiskey. It's the kind of thing that Matt and I would drink from time to time. So they brought this back to me in honor of their trip there for him. So this is in Matt's honor.
Wow. That's really hard to follow. Because what I have, I'll try it anyway, but that's moving, and I hope you enjoy the Talisker. It's a good Scotch. I was recently in Portugal as part of my European trip, and I think I mentioned that one of the dangers of this podcast is now I'm like accumulating interesting alcohols from my travels when I go abroad. And I got really into white port when I was in Porto. Have you ever had that? It's this is Anderson white port. It's a good kind. It looks like Scotch, but it's not. It's a bit sweeter. You have it colder than with traditional darker port. I don't know what it's called, red port. I can't remember what it's called. But I tried this from a really nice guy, Paolo, I believe his name was, in Porto, who was introducing me to it. And that's a 20 years. So this is good stuff. Wow. And I really like it. So I'm not going to lie. I'm pretty excited to be drinking this. I just opened it before the podcast. So cheers.
All right. Cheers.
And with that, our latest episode 11, draws to a close. We have something a little bit fun for the next one on December 15th at 6:00 Eastern. We're going to record our last episode of the year. If you want to join live, you can on YouTube as always. But this one, we're going to take our traditional run of show and throw it aside. It's going to be an end of year extravaganza. If you want to hear Wes and me talk about our favorite mobility policies of the year, the favorite thing we read, some of the things or questions we'll be looking at in 2026, this is the episode to join us for. We would love to have you live, or join us afterwards, listen to the podcast, or watch it on YouTube after it's recorded. But it will be, again, on December 15th at 6:00 Eastern. If you want to get in touch with us, send us a question, give us any kinds of feedback. We always welcome that. Lookbothwayspod@gmail.com. And you can also contact me through my website, davidzipper.com. I'm not even going to ask Wes what his contact info is because he's made clear he doesn't want anyone contacting him. And Wes, do you have any final words of wisdom or advice?
No, see you next time. Looking forward to it.
All right. So until next time, everybody. Bye-bye.